Hi, welcome back. I'm Bunta, ex-Deutsche Bank, ex-McKinsey, and author of The ADHD Boss and Beyond Buy-In. You can find the rest of the information about how to buy the books and me in my bio. But today, I am very excited to talk about something I am literally obsessed with. And that's the question of how do teams work well together, and why do teams that have trust and psychological safety sometimes still fail to be productive in the way that we want them to be? And the answer to that, according to Patrick Lencioni, who's the guy who came up with Five Dysfunctions of a Team, and his company, the Table Group, is Working Genius. Working Genius basically says that everybody has two top geniuses, right, which are their gifts. It's the special secret sauce that makes them so good at what they do. And those two are the things that define whether they're going to be awesome at their job or just kind of like, okay, good at their job, right? Because the working genius is the stuff that gives them joy. It gives them energy. It's a battery that keeps on refueling itself, right? Like it is charging itself the more you use it. And so when people are allowed to work in their genius and they're allowed to kind of deep dive on those things, it's more than even allowing them to work on things they're good at and their strengths, right? Because this is so fundamental to, who they are as working people. What they say is that there's basically 6 options for how to think about your working genius. There are 6 options to choose from in terms of what your gifts and working genius might be. They are remembered by the acronym WIDGET. Not my favorite word, but it's helpful. So essentially, the combination of these, 2 of them are your working genius, 2 of them are your working competence, which means you can do it, you cannot do it, take it or leave it. You might be good at it, might not be good at it, but it's not something that brings you joy. And the last 2 of the 6 that you have, those are your working frustration. Those are things that like, you don't like doing it, you don't want to do it, 10 seconds of doing it, and you're drained, need to go lie down. The thing which I kind of love about working frustrations as well is they say, don't work on your frustrations. So it's entirely the opposite of what everyone tells you. Work on your development goals, work on your weaknesses, whatever. They're kind of going, if the secret sauce that makes you so awesome is your working genius, why waste your time in your frustration with somebody else? It's probably going to be their working genius and you can give that work to them. So the options in terms of what the 6 potential geniuses are. First, it's W, wonder. These people I call the dreamers. They're the big picture people, right? They're the people who are always asking questions about what could be, why it isn't that way, why it is that way. They're challenging the status quo with their questions, and they often don't have the answer, right? Their genius comes from the ability to think that big and to explore the possibilities, which is kind of why I call them the dreamer. But they're not the sort of people that want to focus too much on kind of the data and the answers, etc. They then, I guess, pass off those ideas to the people who their job is to come up with solutions. The ideators, the inventor, what they love nothing more of is to come up with something from scratch, right? Blank page, to just be allowed to go wild and invent whatever they want. That is like their favorite thing in the world. Ask them to copy something, accuse them of overthinking, accuse them of reinventing the wheel, not going to go down super well because they're genuinely enjoying coming up with new things. But if they can come up with 17,000 ideas, somebody actually still needs to decide which one to do. And so that gets passed over to the discerners, the Ds. Now, the discerners, I often call the judges, not in a bad way, in a good way, because they are the personality type, or rather working type. I don't think working genius is very much of a personality test. They are the working type that is really excited about saying 16,998 of these are terrible. These 2 are kind of okay. This one, if you picked A, D, and B, they're the ones who can help you get to an answer and help you refine it, make it better, stress test it, continue to challenge it until you get to an answer that everyone can then kind of come around and deliver, right? So they're incredibly important for the process, because a team that's unable to make decisions is a team that will always be ineffective, regardless of what greatness they have in other areas. Now, somebody then has to deliver this thing, and usually it's going to be a team, a group of people, whether it's a company, whether it's a department, but typically someone's going to have to be given this work. And discerners, they trust the galvanizers to do that. So galvanizers are hype men and women. I call them kind of the cheerleaders or the politicians, because they really are like rah-rahing everybody, getting everyone excited. They live for the vibe. They're bringing the vibe. And for them, there's no greater joy than mobilizing people to act. Like the thing they're allergic to is apathy and just not really caring that much, because that's the opposite of how they show up and what they're interested in. They then might leave and require someone to actually do the work. And then that's where we get to the enablers, who are the helpers. They're the bureaucrats. They're the unsung heroes of every single team and organization, who are quietly in the background helping everybody else be successful. They want to be appreciated, absolutely, but they do not need to be front and center, overly recognized, overly thanked, etc. for the things they're doing. You don't need to stroke their egos, right? Because they're just kind of satisfied with knowing that they helped you out. And then the last of the gifts is tenacity. People are the completer finishers. They are the closers, as I call them. They will make sure that every single item on your 450-line business plan, project plan, whatever it might be, gets executed. They will, as long as they have clarity on what's in that list and what your expectation is, they want to work in confines in a completely different sense from ideators who want to work with no confines. But once you can give them that structure, they can run off and make sure that it happens. And you need those people, because not everyone is interested in seeing the project end to end. Now, you can see how if you're missing any one of these geniuses, that becomes a little bit of a problem in terms of getting something done, because either you ask the wrong question and you're solving the wrong question because you don't have any W's, wonders, or you're not coming up with ideas that are actually good ideas, viable ideas, something you can have discussions about because you have no inventors. You might struggle to make a decision between one idea and another, or to prioritize them, or to further refine them, because there's no discerners. If you have no galvanizers, who's going to get people to actually do the work, right? Like, people 100% work for a salary, but there are other things that people get from work, meaning, purpose, connection. And you can't give any of those things to people if you don't know how to mobilize them and explain how their work links to the things that they want to do. After that, if there's no one to help people actually do it, if people don't have the skills or they don't have the motivation, etc., somebody needs to be there to kind of hold their hand and get their hands dirty and maybe show them what to do, and then kind of walk on to the next group. Doesn't really matter, but they need some help. And so if no one's there to provide it, that's a bit of a challenge. And then you can see, obviously, the tenacities. If you don't have someone who wants to close the thing, you'll end up with 100 unfinished projects or unfinished ideas that kind of never go anywhere because no one was willing to make sure that every little item gets done. Instead of having the systematic approach, you took the firefighter approach and just whatever was most important dealt with then. So that feels like it would be problematic. But each one of these also has a shadow side. And so even having that person on the team, other people might have a perception of them that isn't necessarily good. So for the wanderers, they're often thought to be quite unproductive and sort of not constructive in a lot of these sessions, because they're often the person who, after all the decisions have been made, there's been a long chat, there's been several horse trading situations, people have negotiated. They're the ones who will come in like 2 steps before the end and be like, hey, but did you guys think of this? And often we did not think of this. And so that becomes a huge challenge for the team. So I am often in that scenario, but they are very good at being able to spot that. And it's almost annoying because if you get to that point, you're like, why didn't you tell us this earlier? But, it didn't come up earlier. Maybe they weren't asked that earlier. Maybe you were solving for something and you already decided that was the problem. There are many reasons why they don't, but it can be frustrating. Then there are the ideators, inventors. So they'll just keep churning new ideas. Back to this idea of reinventing the wheel, happily. They will keep on refining, keep on doing. It can make them perfectionists as well, right? Because they want to get to the perfect solution, this one amazing idea. And often that doesn't really exist. And sometimes they need someone who has a different view of it, a discerner, who is able to say this versus that, right? But discerners are often thought of as being quite dismissive because they're just kind of going no, to a bunch of bad ideas, or just like meh ideas, right? Like it doesn't even have to be that deep. But certainly people get in their feelings when discerners are batting down their ideas. Similarly, galvanizers, people become quite disconcerted about their habit of coming in, during the hype and then leaving. So they can be perceived as being quite lazy, actually, because their job of hyping people, of mobilizing people, we often don't think of that as a strength. We often think of that as like being good with people, but it's a completely different concept. If you've been in an organization without a galvanizer and having a leader who's a very poor galvanizer, you will understand what it means to have trouble getting people motivated, amped, hyped, ready to do stuff. And then if you have no enablers, there's no one to do it. But simultaneously, we often push enablers out by saying that they are not ambitious enough. They aren't go-getting enough. They don't want enough for themselves. They're willing to let their work speak for itself. Now, that may be true, but not necessarily. Their ambition is to help the organization. It is to contribute to the greater good. It is to make other people better. That doesn't mean that they have to be starring in the movie. Not everything is about them in their minds. And so they're quite happy for other people to get the praise and recognition as long as they are appreciated for what they're bringing. And the tenacity, you can see, of course, that lots of people might think they are pretty pedantic and very stuck in making sure that every little thing kind of gets done, which can feel quite frustrating for people. The other thing, which I think is very helpful, is that none of these are really strengths or weaknesses, right? Like, they are just states and they can manifest poorly. They can be helpful in some situations and unhelpful in others. But I kind of love that ability for it as a tool to recognize that you can be a leader and not be discerning, and that's fine. As long as you have someone who is discerning, you can stay in your genius and operate predominantly in your genius so that you can bring the best to the organization. That doesn't mean you don't have good judgment. It doesn't mean that you don't have common sense, you're illogical, you're not analytical. No, it just means that you're not getting your joy from there. That is not the special sauce you're bringing to the team or the environment. And if you really want to keep yourself motivated in doing things, you'll over-index on being in your genius and allow someone else who's really excited about discernment to come in and do the discerning. I think it's also really good for breaking hierarchies in that way, because who gets to do the work becomes who's best at the work, who is most energized by the work, who is most motivated to do it. There are two types of motivation, intrinsic and extrinsic. Intrinsic is the kind of that comes from yourself. Like, that intrinsic motivation is just you feeling it. No one told you, no one hyped you, no one forced you. Whereas extrinsic is always like there's an external factor somehow that made you do something. And the amazing thing about working genius is that when you ask people to work in their genius, you don't have to convince them, right? Like, it is always going to be something that they will jump at and do, which is why when people ask me, how do I know which one I am? I ask them, like, what's the one that you look at and you go, I could spend the rest of my time doing only that for the rest of my career and it would be fine. And then they often, by process of elimination, can kind of get to the top two, if not the top one. For me, my genius is ideation and discernment. I love being an ID. It means that I come up with ideas very quickly, but also know which ones of them are not intelligent, often before I even say the idea. So it comes out sounding like I'm super certain of everything I'm saying. And I've thought about this for a very long time, but often I really have not. And it was very helpful for me to have the vocabulary of working genius to be able to explain to my team that, like, don't scramble to do everything that sounds like a good idea just because I said it. Sometimes I'm just ideating, like, for the vibes. I don't actually want you to implement this. Like, just debate me. Let's have some discernment. Let's make these ideas better. And maybe some of them will be used in the future and maybe some of them won't. It was also helpful, I think, for my team to be able to also get me out of ideation when what they really needed was just a decision instead of kind of more ideas of what they could potentially do. It also helped me understand things like I had an employee who was so smart, so intelligent, and just never wanted to come up with anything. And I was raised very much in the tradition of, if you have a problem, you come to your manager with a solution already, like, so that you can show that you've at least thought about it, but you got stuck here and this is what you need help with. And she didn't really like doing that, to be honest. And it was kind of tough because she was the product person at a AI startup that I was CEO of at the time. And I remember just kind of learning this framework and being like, wait, what are you? And it turned out that she was a galvanizer enabler. And I was like, that makes so much sense. That is an energizer bunny of a person. And so I just would send her on client demos to do presentations, whatever, by herself. And people were really shocked. They were like, you're the CEO, you're the face. Shouldn't you be the one who's front and center? And my response to them was always the same, but she loves it. She's excellent at it. She will get faster at it way faster than I will do. And like, it doesn't have to be about me all the time, right? Like, I'm not trying to build a cult of personality here. My competencies, remember the second two, are enablement and wonder. So I have no problem with enabling her to be better. I also realized that it is possible for people to reframe what they're doing as one of their geniuses, even if it isn't. So in her case, when I really needed someone to do a campaign, or it was 10 minutes before the meeting and I needed some slides, I could go to her and say, please, can you help me out and do this? And for her, it was no longer invention anymore, right? Now it was enablement because she was doing it specifically for me and because I would really appreciate her doing it. And so I've tried in many ways to bring that principle to the rest of my work. My frustrations are galvanizing and tenacity. I hate hyping people. I don't want to hype them on anything. I don't want to sell them on anything. I don't want to convince them of anything. I kind of just go like, if you want to work with me, that's fantastic. If you love the product I'm selling, that power to you. If you don't, there are so many other products, like go find one of them. It's amazing, right? So I get amped by ideas, right? I get excited about ideas. And so I try to make sure that if I am put in a position where I have to galvanize people in some way, that I can bring new ideas to that and bring some creativity on the spot to that, because that's the only way that I'm going to get through that without resenting the entire experience and just like wanting to get out of there. For me, my dream job would be sitting in a room, preferably a dungeon, having people come in, tell me what their problem is and leave so that I can like take a nap. That would be the best possible role for me to be in, which I recognize is also like hella funny because I am a facilitator primarily, even at a director level of when I've been, reporting to the C-suite. I love facilitation and the ability to use conversations to come up with actual outputs and outcomes. People might think that that is all about galvanization. And actually, for me, it's about helping people to ideate and then live discerning within which ideas are good, deciding on a plan of action, and then giving them enough information to go and implement. That's what facilitation is to me. And tenacity, I have no real excuse for that because I've been a program director for the better part of a little bit over a decade now. I should probably like it more. And I am decent at it, right? Like I obviously have the ability to manage tasks in a structured and often sustainable way. But for example, 2 years ago, I was leading a large scale operational transformation to get back £7 million for quite a large charity in a 3-month period, which was super fun. And I didn't have a project plan. Like I had a list of things that needed to get done. And I would have conversations with people on a daily basis about how they were doing. I offered my support. It was kind of like, if you want me to help you, awesome. If you don't, also fine. All of this needs to be done by this date. How you get there, all good. Because I truly don't believe that there was any value that I was adding to them by just being the person who told them what dates they were. For those who wanted to make project plans for their little bit, they absolutely did that. And then soon realized that if you're having continuous conversations, you have the right level of psychological safety to have real transparency on what's going on. Often, that project plan might be about sequencing. If you can manage that on a daily basis and your scope is defined enough to do that, I mean, what do you need the Excel for? I hope that's the conclusion they came to. But it did all work out, and we did actually manage to achieve our goal in the stated time. So I think that's just an example of how you can kind of get out of your frustration, even for a task that you think is one-to-one matched to your frustration, and turn it into something else. Be creative about how you make it about something else. I think the cool thing about Working Genius is that it can apply to other parts of life, like how you work with your partner, for example. Perhaps there are ways that you think about how you get things done domestically that are not super helpful. I have two friends, one of whom is a wonder ideator and the other one who's a discerner galvanizer. They are never getting anything done, right? Like that is clear to them. They have a nanny and they have someone to help clean their home simply because like they need an enabler to make sure things are running and they need someone to make sure that things happen when they're supposed to happen and that all the tasks and activities happen. That's how they're managed. to manage their life in a way that allows them to be free to really live in their genius even at home. So I guess I kind of encourage everybody to, one, have a look at Working Genius. They have a great podcast. You can go to the Table Groups website. You can go to their book. You can go to my book, The HD Boss, because I talk quite a lot about Working Genius in that book and how you can apply it to your work. Go and learn more about this topic. I think it's fascinating and such a useful tool. I was raised really believing strongly in MBTI. I've done DISC over the years, colors, Gallup Strength Finder. All of these things are fantastic. But none of them has ever been able to tell me how to work differently with the people who were reporting to me or to the people who I was reporting to. None of them focused on not the team dynamic and personalities, but really how we operate and how we optimize our internal workflows to get to better outcomes. So absolutely love it for that. So go off and do your team and find out exactly where you are strong, as in where you have the bulk of your geniuses, and where you are weak, as in you have the bulk of your frustrations. I learned recently that after 1.5 million people who've now done this assessment, the Working Genius assessment, that the two most commonly cited frustrations are galvanizing and inventing, which I thought was very funny and kind of went like, yeah, that kind of tracks. Like, I can see why people dislike doing those two things. And I believe that one of the two most prolific kind of strengths and gifts was enablement. And that also makes sense because often people just want to be helpful to others and want to do things that make others successful. And that kind of tracks with functioning organizations for me. The key is not to turn any one of those things into a strength or a weakness that someone needs to work on. They should rather be allowed to work in their working genius. So I hope you enjoyed that. I will probably continue to make more videos about working genius. So 100%, let me know what you'd like to see in the comments.